the last thing that we talked about. Now we come to another subject, amphoteric compounds. Let's see what does amphoteric mean. Any species that can react as either an acid or a base is described as amphoteric. So anything that can act as both acid or base. In some reactions they can become an acid, in some reactions they can become a base. فأنت شتي هاتو لا رياكشنك أسيد بو ظلام لا رياكشنك ترى بيز بو وهذا هم بأسيد هم ببيزيش, then we call that substance as amphoteric. We call it amphoteric. One of those compounds that's very important is water, which can act as either an acid or a base. It can act as both of them. Such a substance acts as an acid or a base. How? Why they are acting as an acid or base in different places, depending on the strength of the acid or base it's reacting. For example, if it's reacting with something that has a higher acidity than itself, then the H2O becomes a base. كواتا اگر هاتو لقال شتيكا reactioni كر acidity لخوي زياتر بو. For example, in this equation, in this reaction, we know that H2SO4 has a higher acidity than H2O. So of course, H2O with H2SO4, H2O with H2SO4 will act as a base. Why? Because the H2SO4 will definitely become an acid. It will donate a hydrogen to the H2O. So H2O will accept a proton and it will act as a base. كواتا اگر لك اشتكا هات كلا خوي اسيديتي زياتر بو بون من لك H2SO4 هات H2SO4 اسيد يكا سترونغا اسيديتي باشا اتواني H دونيت كان كواتا ليريا H2SO4 ابي تشيبكا ابي هيدروجين بدونيت كا H2O باللي ورغري كات H2O ليرا بيز. But finish H2O with NH3, H2 with NH3, the NH3 compared to the H2O, it's more basic, not more acidic. So H2O is more acidic than NH3. كواتا قربي بتسلسل لك سيركين بقولنا لما pH حسابي كين H2O pH كي حوتا. H2O has a pH of 7. Then what is H2SO4? H2SO4 is an acid, so it must have a pH lower than 7. So it's more acidic than H2O. But NH3 is basic. It has a higher pH. It's more basic than H2O. So H2O, according to acidity, is more acidic than NH3. That's why H2O becomes an acid. It can donate a proton to the NH3. Not accepted here. That's why in this reaction, H2O has acted as an acid. Then H2O, as you can see, it has acted as both acid and base. That's why H2O is amphoteric. كواتا ببيور رياكشني كتياتي يمكن H2O جارها أسيديكا جارها بيزيكا ما دام تواني أوي هي هردو كان بكات ببيور رياكشني كتياتي نك همو جارك بابلين أسيد بيان همو جار بيز بيت ببيور رياكشني كتياتي أول شيء amphoteric. So generally you have to just recognize that H2O is amphoteric. But in a specific reaction, you can see sometimes it's basic. If the reaction is given, you can directly say if it's basic or not, if it's acidic or not. But in general, if no reaction is given, we will say it's amphoteric. أجمع من الرياكشن شيء للرياكشن كيا مثلا H ورقتبو كاتو بيزيكا بالما أجر H دونيت كردبو أو أسيديكا كاتو للرياكشن كي جاريها بدايته زاني أسيديكا بيزيكا بس أجر بعم باسيكر توالي أمفوتيريكا توالي أمفوتيريكا. What else can become amphoteric? What else can become amphoteric besides H2O? Even though in the book there is only H2O that is mentioned as a compound, but as ions nothing has been mentioned, and yet questions will be asked in this part. These ions, SO4, SSO3, SSO4, H2PO4, HPO4, HCO3, HS negative, but this is 3 here. We add 3 there. Our CH was Japan. HCO3. These are all amphoteric substances, but they are actually ions. They are not compounds. فهذا compound نية بس ion. Then why are they amphoteric? If you remember, we solved the question like this. Sorry, here. Look at H2SO4. It contains hydrogen and a negative. If it contains a hydrogen like this one, then it can donate a proton. It can act as acid. But it also has a negative. So it can accept a proton as well. That's why it can also act as a base. The same is also true for these ions. The same is also true for these ions. These ions, they can donate a hydrogen in some certain reactions. And they can, at the same time, they can also accept a proton because they have negative. So any ion with H and is negatively charged, HBO negatively charged, HBO negatively charged, then it can act as a like an amphoteric. It can act as an acid and also as a base. كواتا ionities وكو أمانة. But ionic اللي هاتو. They come from polyprotic acids. ionic اللي هاتون لا polyprotic كانوا هاتون. The polyprotic acid itself cannot become amphoteric, but the following ions from those polyprotic acids, where they still have a hydrogen, at least one hydrogen, they can become amphoteric. كواتا أسيدا كان أصلا كان خوان ناتوانو ببن باب amphoteric. بلام أجر هاتو أو أني دواي خوي هشتا هير H تي مابو ونبمو بنيجاتيف همي أنا بن بأمفوتيريك. چونك H تي كاتوانو دوانيتيكا نيجاتيف H تي كاتوانو وريديتو. كاتا مانا أمفوتيريك. كاتا مانا أمفوتيريك. Let's look at how. How can they become amphoteric? For example, one of those are H2S. Reacts with H2O to become H3O and HS. HS here is a base. Why? Because if it wants to go back, it will accept a proton. So it will act as a base. It's a conjugate base, right? Conjugate base of this acid. At the same time, this HS, if it reacts with H2O, it can become H3O and H2 negative. And H2 negative. Here, what is the HS? It has donated a proton to the H2O. هذا بيوشتي كالرياكشن اللي راكبه. اللي H3O ناتواني H3 ورقليه، بس تواني دوني تجابوي HS لي ورقليه، لما يجي كمان. بس لما يدوني أنا H2O كحازر لي ورقليه، شو كتوزع HS acidity زيادة لا H2O. HS acidity زيادة. So H2S here is acid. As you can see, HS has acted as both acid and a base. هم base ده هم acidic. That's why HS is amphoteric. أجيب تنبيه. ها مثلا أما مثلا اللي رأيك أما أسيدنيا أم بسيارة. بون من HS أسيدنيا أي ماشية. أما conjugate base. أجيب إنه صار موضوع كان بيشتر. سير معنا كل مثلا HSO4 can also react with H2O, but with H2O to become diprotic can to become H3O and SO4. And in here it acts as an acid, but in here it acts as a base. Kata HSO4 here can هلا دي استك الشحمانة HSO4. Because it acts as an acid, also it can act as a base. Have acidic, have to know basic. But basic depending what is reacting with. Depending, let's say, reaction. Is it reacting with something that is more acidic or that is more basic? If it reacts with something more acidic, it will become a base. If it reacts with something more basic, it will become an acid. اگر لگش چه کابو acidity لخوی زیادر بو اما به بیس بود. او تاوکو H2O acidity زیادر لچاو HSO4. But if it reacts with something that is more basic, when يعني less acidic, بس خوي acidity زيادر لچاو H2O. كواتا ببقى acid بول كH2O كacidity كمان. ماشي. How questions are asked in this subject like this. Which of the following is not amphoteric? Amphoteric in general. Then we will say H2PO4, yes, it is amphoteric. Why? Because it can donate a proton. It can also accept a proton. So it's amphoteric. It can donate a proton and it has negative, so it can also accept a proton. Also amphoteric. H2O, yes, it is amphoteric. Can do both. But what cannot be amphoteric? Cannot donate a proton. HPO4 cannot donate a proton. It doesn't have any hydrogen. It cannot donate any protons. That's why PO4 is not. It can accept a proton, but it cannot donate. That's why PO4 is not amphoteric. It's just a base. Right, Alan? Only accepts that. أو بس يعني خوار وكرنا لا يأونية باش ربي الإسلام.
ما مصاقين. مصا شرطه هموشته كشارجكي نيجاتيف بيو هيدروجين تيابي يعني act as amphoteric يا شرطني.
سيركا شرطني بو دبري وتم أبيله polyprotic كانوا هاتبه. كسبون منا. OH amphoteric مي. باشا. NH2 amphoteric مي. H شتيا. H شتيا. أمش أوكش H شتيا ونيجاتيفيشن هذا كان. طالما amphoteric مي. عادة أنا بدو أنفسي يعني كزور هم به إيه ولا بتشاي إيه وابد H شتيا بيو نيجاتيف بيت أو دوانا من هي تنابن بأمفوتريك بس تنها بيزن. طالما بعض ويكلب polyprotic acid كانوا هاتبي بالله أبدا بأمفوتريك.
بس خوش معه.
صح.
بالله.
عفوا ولا متى نجش شو مزام كا أمفوتريك يعني شو مزام.
هركاتك رقم. هركاتك H كتاب. لقوا نيجاتيفا. H كتابه لقوا نيجاتيفا أو أمفوتريك. بو H كتاب يعني تواني H دوانيت. H كتابه جعلت نسير كهمي H كشيء كم جار مسرع يعني بوي بأسم بنستو H كم جار مسرع. H كتابه لقوا يشارج كشيء هم أنا كشارج كي نيجاتيف بو أو شتا نيجاتيفا كدلالة لو كتواني H ورقة. بوني H كش دلالة لو كتواني دواني جيشكا. بوي أمفوتريك. باشا.
أمانة substance يعني compound أمانة.
substance. شو بو؟ أيوة. substance كلنا كويتي substance يعني compound يشجرته يعني ion يشجرته. هذا كان كده.
يعني ما هالشيء هيدروجين تيابو أو كاتو تاني بلين أو يعني not amphoteric كذا.
أبغى بشرتك أبغى نيجاتيف شتى بكرة.
نيجاتيف شتى.
في جو H2O من هي H2O بابل النيجاتيف نيا أو جوازة. أو compound ديك أمفوتريكا بس وكو آيون أبغى تو نيجاتيف شتى. سألني سألني أو شيء. والله ما كشيء. What is the answer for the next question?
ما مساعد شو تاني شو نيجاتيف نية.
فات والله ما كشيء.
H2O.
عفري. ليريا وجدتي which one is an amphoteric compound. مثلا زور كان كل كيمياء موضوع كاني تجشني أسانا يعني توب أساني لموضوع بسيارة وأنا حكي بلام كشكل شيء هذا زور بيجات طلبة باش اشتق كلمة جنابيني. Sometimes a student might not see a word or the question is kind of, you just need to understand the question. It's always easy to solve, but you just have to understand the question. In here, when it says a compound, so you have to look for only a compound. Some students forget about this compound and they choose D. Yes, H2PO4 is amphoteric, HPO4 is also amphoteric, H2O is also amphoteric. All of the three are amphoteric, but only one of them is compound. But you can compound that. That's why the answer is C. But if I write another question with the same options. If the question says, which one is amphoteric or amphoteric substance? يعني أجا substance الشيء اللي قال يعني قال شانه. Then the answer will become أو كاتب بلا. The answer will be D. Let's go to the next subject. OH in compounds. OH لنا compound. Back to later أجمع ليفت. زي ما بس تيجي. What does it mean OH in compounds? You know, with OH, but this OH here is hydroxide, which is OH negative. This one becomes base. We know that. It's a base. But what we are talking about here, we are not talking about bases. We are talking, this is ionic bond. Between the metal and the OH is ionic bond. But in here, we are talking about covalently bond OH group. In an acid, it's referred to as hydroxyl group. Capito C, acida. Instead of hydroxide, we call it hydroxyl. For example, we know H2SO4. If you remember, we said the hydrogen is not bonded. The hydrogens are not bonded with the sulfur. It's actually bonded with the oxygen, like this. But hydrogen and oxygen can. So we call these OH groups hydroxyl. Okay, hydroxyl. So what is these acids? They are molecular compounds. They are not ionic compounds. They are not ionic bonds. They don't have ionic bonds. We are talking about covalently bonds, so become molecular compounds. If they have OH groups, the OH group which are hydroxyl group, they can be either acidic or amphoteric. أو خاطئ أو دير مهمة كورينا. أجا برسيار هاتوا. لو الزارية بلا ولا molecular compound كان. أجر OH أنت أبو تشيتونا بلا basic. So in the question, if it says a molecular compound containing OH groups can be one, you will not say basic. It doesn't say that it releases OH. It says it has OH. And the OH is not hydroxide. It is not ionic. It's just an OH equivalent bond. That's why it becomes acidic and amphoteric. It's either acidic or amphoteric. And these compounds can be affected by the number of the oxygen inside the atom or inside the compound. Oxygen. How? What does it mean by oxygen? So if you have more or less oxygen, what happens to these compounds? Depending on the number of oxygens. Here is the moral, the most important part of this subject. تشيبيو ترى موضوعك اللي رأيت شيء أساسي موضوعك. Point موضوع. What is the point here? The point is, how can oxygen affect acidity? Affect these compounds that contain OH? We will say, for these compounds, acidity and polarity. For these compounds, acidity and polarity increase. Acidity and polarity increase because larger number of oxygen, the larger the number of oxygen is, the more acidic compound is. كواتا حتاكو عام درا عم درزو مهمة. So the larger the number of oxygen, the more oxygen we have in a compound, or a compound that has more oxygen, more acidic that compound will be. Look at here. Look at the figure. As you can see, this one is HCl. This one is HClO2. This one is HClO4. This one is HClO3. This one is HClO4. As you can see, as oxygen number, this one has 1 oxygen, 2 oxygen, 3 oxygen, and 4 oxygen. Acidity increases. If you go back to the weak acid and strong acid rules, that for oxy acid, we look at the difference between oxygen and hydrogen to determine if it's a weak acid or strong acid. As you can see, how many oxygen is in the first one? 1. How many hydrogen is in the first one? 1. What is the difference? 0. It's a weak acid. This one is also weak. HClO2 is also weak. 2 oxygen and 1 hydrogen is also, the difference is 1. It's also weak acid, but it's not as weak as the first one. It has become stronger acid. Then HClO3 is stronger. Then HClO4, which has a difference of 3 difference. 4 minus 1 is 3. That's why it's the strongest acid. Okay, it is the strongest acid. All right, if this is the strongest acid, let's just write it here. This is the strongest acid. So this one is the weakest acid. When acidity also increases, what else increases? Polarity. Polarity also increases. And we have explained before that polarity is inversely proportional with bond strength. We said if an acid is weak acid, it means that the hydrogen is strongly bonded to the ion and it cannot be donated easily, cannot be separated easily. That's why the bond is strong. But if an acid is strong acid, if an acid is a strong acid, it means that the hydrogen is bonded, covalently bonded with the ion weakly. It can easily be separated. It can be easily donated. هاوت ما قربته acidic strong بيت يعني زور بأسانية شكلية بيته يعني بوندك ويكا أقربته acidic weak يعني بوندك بقوته بأساني ناشكت لنا بيته. That is why we will say this one is the strongest acid but has the weakest bond.
ما مستعجل أسيدك ويك بين جاست بوندك
يعني بوندك بقوته بله
مش عارفة
كواتها أوي أو سر weakest bond here I'm saying the strongest bond here. Yesterday this question was asked between these 4. It said which one has the strongest bond. أبواب موتاتي أبواب موتا HCl. Okay. أساق برون سر كنا لا براب بو ساري وزاليكا ساري منتشفى لا براب منتشفى الصوت لا الصوت
vamos a sostener.
كورنا بشنا سلا برا الصوت بسياري بنجاسة page 102, question. Okay, in this question, it says in which of the following has an OH bond is least polar? Kataha polarity can be. So least polars mean also least acidic.
أينية
So, لا بعكسه كمترين acidity كم يعني كرة
دي ما وصل
دي كما هو عبالة ويتمان هتاكو oxygen the higher the oxygen polarity increase acidity increase او كلكم لو كاتا زين جوابي تشي راست ابو اگر بيوتايا والله ما كايبوا بيوتا مثلا ماس acidic والله ما كايبوا باشا دوينه شلون هاتبوه yesterday the question asked which one has the strongest bond it will always it's also D عقوتي بوندك شلون بقدر حرف الدرجة
هو كي ويكا بويو كاتب بوندكي سترونج
طبعا زور باش شكرنا جاء قبل بالسيارة ايش بلا يعني
عفوا تاكو سيالوكي كم تربي اسيديكاكي كم ترى
تاكو اكسجينكي كم تربي اسيديكي كم ترى اكسجينكي زور تربي اسيديكي زيادة
هو رجي اكسجينكي اللي كم دانو الذي اللي شوارم داني شحيك سيالوكي زيادة كم ترى
شلون
ستولا يكما اوه هر يك اشمان هنا شوارم مش هر يك اش
لا اخلي را فرم اتشكم شيء مهمة لريا اتشكم مهمة اكسجينكي مهمة شو اكسجينكي اگر بيت اكسجينكي او اكسجينكي نعلم جماري اكسجين نما هو جماري هيدروجين جماري اكسجين
توزك نساقم دم مغريتش
نه ان شاء الله سلامتي ان شاء الله كيش معنا اويك بيشتر باسم كيف وتم راس جماري اكسجينك يعني شي تريش يعني جوازي بين اكسجين وهيدروجينك ابي زور به مثلا لا 4 اكسجين برابر يك هيدروجين يعني جوازه كان 3 دانه باش كان هوا بيرجع كانه بزانين بوجه بابر نسر موضوعك خوبا go back to our lesson. Now, we said if oxygen number is higher in a compound, then it has a higher polarity, it's a stronger acid or acidity will increase. And also, let's ask why. What is the reason? The reason is here, this part. Because the electronegative oxygen atoms draw electron density away from OH bond that makes it more polar. What does this mean? It means that when some more oxygen are present inside the compound, it attracts, draw means attracts electron density. There's a bond here. Let's look at the figure. There's a bond here. Between what? Between the hydrogen and the oxygen. This oxygen, as you can see this red part, these are all electron clouds. Electron clouds. Electronia. These electron clouds are bonded to the hydrogen so strongly that they don't let the hydrogen to be separated easily. But as these oxygen are increasing, for example here, these are also oxygen, these electrons here are somehow attracted, just attraction, nothing. Draw. They move a little bit towards the other oxygen. When they go towards the other oxygens, they get distracted, let's say. Distracted by those attractions, and then they don't attract the hydrogen as much as possible, as much as the other one, the HCl will attract. That's why they forget about the hydrogen, then the hydrogen can easily be separated from it because they don't focus on the hydrogen all the time. They don't focus on this bond all the time, or this bond between the oxygen and the hydrogen. That's why the hydrogen will be broken easily. فهذا اللي فكرة كتشيء. أو أكسجين أنا كزورة من لنا compound يكا. كأكسجين زوري تيابي كومباوند شيء كان إلكترون بري خوينا الرايكيشن دوري كانوا لك شيء تحدك يعني مشغول أنا كان دوري أنا كان لك شيء دوري أنا كانوا لبوندي بيني اتش او لو اتش كهم أنا بونتو اللي دوري كده فأنت أم بوندت شيء ليه ويكتر به بو لو الإلكترون كان شراني كشة إذا كانت فانا الرايكيشن شو كالكترونيجاتيف هذا كان الكترون رايكيشن الكترونيجاتيف يعني شيء يعني هذا كان الكترونيجاتيف الكترون رايكيشن او تشبه بلا خوين الرايكيشن لكي دوره كونه لهيدروجينه دوره كونه تركيز على سر هيدروجينه زور نامنه او كات بوند ويكبت اسانتر بوندك اشكه تواليت بين بشي ابن بوندك زور ويك از بوند بتو وفتح حسابي سترونس تيجي نكورينا كيف يعني شو Who has understood this? Either way, let me repeat it again. When when oxygen has a higher number inside a compound, those oxygens draw electron density, attract electrons. Away from what? Away from those OH bonds, the bond between OH. If the electrons are drawn towards the oxygens, then the bond between OH become more polar. The bond between OH become weaker. That's why the H is broken more easily and then becomes more polar, becomes more acidic. ماشي كسب سعرية كويس النمونية هي عين الشيء ليس عين الموضوع same subject another example as you can see oxygen is here it's a base it's chromium 2 hydrogen so it's a base it's an ionic bond but when it becomes 3 oxygens the 3 oxygen makes it a little bit less basic, or we can say amphoteric. But with 4 oxygens, the compound is entirely acidic. And here, the bond, the ionic bond changes to covalent bond. bond من هرنامنا. لا أسيدك ionic bond من نامنا. هم يبقى covalent bond. هذا covalent bond. تيجي ionic bond يبقى نامنا. هسه لرا ionic bond بس لرا أهم بس تنها بهو إجمالي زوري أكسجينه بوندا كان ضعيفة كانت أي كاب covalent bond. كواتل لرا شيء زي كده أسيديتي زي كده. دو أكسجين سي أكسجين شو أكسجين أكسيد زي كده.
صح.
والله.
عفوا. يعني أنا وصلت HCl2 بس HCl3 أمفوتيريكا HCl4 أسيديكا
ويسروا
أم نموني بيسيكو
أمفوتيريكو أسيديكا زورتا يعني أوا باشتري شدويا so everyone please these 3 examples
أجر أكسجين كدو بيسيكا أجر سيبو أمفوتيريكا
بس بوم نموني باش كان يعني هن بكاكسا قلنا شي بو هم يرافكي
وداري بالرافي
بوم مش بس بوم كومباوند ماشي we have as a compound we had only H2O as amphoteric. That was explained in the book. But since there is also this compound, this is you might ask in the exam or in ministry exam questions, this amphoteric might be also asked. It says which one of the following can be amphoteric. You have to know that CrOH3 is considered as amphoteric. Okay. Another example. To also admit, to prove that having more oxygen makes something more acidic. Between what? Acetic acid and ethanol. So in acetic acid, but not in ethanol, a second oxygen atom is bonded to the carbon atom, connected to the H group. That explains why acetic acid is acidic, but ethanol is not. Kawata. But which shiwa? oxygen getirman here. Look at here. We have two carbon. But in here, there is only one oxygen in the ethanol. This is ethanol. This is acetic acid. In acetic acid, we have another oxygen. Only due to that oxygen, the compound becomes acidic. بس بهوي oxygen compound هذا acidic. بس بهوي oxygen. باشا. لبيا مادام oxygen ثانية neutral. It's just neutral. It's nothing. It's not acidic. Even though acetic acid is a weak acid, even though only 1.7% of acetic acid will ionize, but still, this hydrogen can be donated. Still, this hydrogen can become acidic. But in ethanol, we don't care about this. We don't care about this part. بلا أنه مهمنية كربون وهيدروجين كمان بلا مهمنية كربون وهيدروجين كان كبيكون. بلا أنه مهمة أو أكسجين كو جمالي أكسجين كي لقلو هيدروجين كم بأكسجين ونسا. باشا. We have one more oxygen here. So this one more oxygen makes acetic acid as acid. As more acidic than ethanol. Just by adding an oxygen. يعني هذا بقول oxygen كزيادة acetic acid ده بيبقى acid. فعشان كده والله ما قربونه من البرسيان هاتوا بوشي acetic acid أو ethanol acidنيا علين because of the second oxygen. وهو oxygen كزيادة. باشا. ويطلع شيء the second oxygen on the carbon draws electron density away from the شيء دور كاتو oxygen كا. electron كم بيخوان رايك شو أم بونده ويكا كابو يبكشكات وأنا بشكل. هالسنة زور ناشكي زور كمان. عين لصايك وين حوتي أشكي بس. عمو أسرق أسيدة جنا بع. والله مهرش تحر أبي بعه. There is still some H in the solution. Okay, but ethanol cannot donate anything. We remember that. Ethanol, we said it's not electrolyte. Basha? It's not electrolyte.
يعني ما مصاب oxygen دياري نياك كبيسكان أمفوتوريك ولا؟
لا. اللي بس موضوع كمان أسيدي كان أمفوتيريك أعلى مثلا. ذات تبديل اللي كنا. باشا كورنا. بس
مثلا C2H5 H أسيدي كان أمفوتوريك.
نيوترال أو إيثانول أو تاها إيثانول شيء نيوترال. بيزنيا. لا أسيد نبيزة.
أي أوكا CH3CO شكلشون زاني ماك أسيدة؟
أوتو فورمولي أسيدك أسيد لا بربه. CH3CO.
ما مثلا يعني مقصد أزانم خويناي CH3COH يعني أسيدك أسيد. بس يعني شون زاني من أسيديكا؟
بهو أو أكسجين الزيادة. أما.
أو أكسجين الزيادة.
بله. قبل كي نوع أو H3O دروسكات. H ريليزكات. يعني ما هموي دلالته. بله يرى أجر بأم موضوع باسكين بني أو أكسجين. ذهبني أكسجين. هنا صار موضوعك. These reactions. We have three types of reactions. لكتبكات دواني باس كردوا. دو نوعاني باس كردوا. بس يمان هي بويت وصل كل السيم يعني باللي ريا باس كده. لهنا شو أنا أتمنى شابتري دو باس يكين بلان برامن لشابتري سيا أبي باس كده بجواني. Okay. First one. If you see an acid reacting with metal carbonate. If you see an acid reacting with metal carbonate, it will form a salt CO2 and H2O. So for the CO2 and H2O, we can memorize it. It's just always CO2 and H2O. But for the salt, what is a salt? plain salt. So first, let's what's carbonate. Carbonate is CO3. So it's negative. It's CO3. Anything with CO3 is a carbonate. If it comes with a metal and reacts with acid, this is what we have. Let's look at the definition of salt. This is the definition of salt. It's an ionic compound composed of cation, and normally from a base, cation. And this one is very important. There must be an anion from the acid. So every time when we talk about a salt, salt must have an anion from any acid. For example, if the acid is HCl, it must have the Cl of that acid with a metal. So salt is always a metal with an anion of acid. Always. For example, we have H2SO4 with something else. The SO4 inside that salt with a metal becomes a salt. Let's look at here. Let's go back to the equation. As you can see, we said this is carbonate. This is an acid. Whenever they react together, they become CO2, H2O. These are done. These are always constant. But the salt, that must be written. Which one is the acid? This one is the acid. It must have the anion of the acid. So the anion of the acid is SO4. What is the cation? Na is the cation. Cation, the metal cation is Na. We only have Na. So it becomes NaSO4, and SO4 has a charge of 2, so it becomes Na2SO4. It becomes Na2SO4. Let's balance. That I have already balanced the nitrogen. That's the sodium, sorry. We have 2 sodium, we have 2 sodium here. The 2 is here. Okay. How many carbons do we have here? 2. Here 1. So we add 2. چند کاربن من هبی للایم چپا 2. للای راست یک من هبو so add 2 composition. How many SO4 do you have? 1 SO4. How many SO4 here? 1 SO4. So the SO4s are balanced. SO4 can balance. What else? How many hydrogens do you have? 2 times everyone. Let me remind you something about balance. Always leave hydrogen and oxygen to the last. Even in most cases, oxygen even comes after hydrogen. أرسل لزربي بالانس كان معنا أكسجين دوای هيدروجين يجي. يعني هيدروجين أكسجين خير أخيرها هيدروجين لدوايش هيدروجين كأنجا أكسجين كا. So now hydrogen. How many hydrogens do you have? 2 here, 2 there, and the so we have 4 hydrogens on the reactant side. But we only have 2 on the product side. We add 2 here. So it becomes 4. Now the oxygen must be balanced. 2 oxygens, 2 times 3 on the NaHCO3, 2 times 3, 6. 4 here, 10. Here, 2 oxygens here, 4. 2 here, 6. Another 4, 10. So it is already balanced. It is already balanced.
ما مصيان بسالة. أصلا سكشن يكنا ما نويتوا كأسيد رياكت لقى أكتيف ميتال كات هيدروجين دروسكا.
هو أكتيف ميتال ني آخر. أما شيء ميتال كربونيتا. أما كومباوند. هو أكتيف ميتال كجوته. أورو لي السيما.
أصلا كربون الميتال ني واه.
اللي ربع تختينا ميتال ني. أما هو كبوت ما نملك أكتيف ميتال يعني بس ميتال كخوذة. اللي رك على ميتال كربونات يعني كومباوند يكا. كربونيتي تياو كربون داكش لقى ميتال كا كومباوند يدرس.
بس.
Let me give you another example. You can solve it by yourselves. It's an easy example. Just try to solve it by yourselves. Let's say HCl reacts with Na2 CO3. Try to finish that reaction by itself. Okay. That was it. That's the whole thing. CO2 H2O. Just memorize it. CO2 H2O salt. What is the salt? An ion from acid and a cation from the base. What about the second one? The second one we had, if you remember from section 1, we said an acid and base can react together to form salt and water. What do we call this reaction? This type of reaction where acid and bases are reacting together, we call them neutralization. كاتبهم جور السلطان هذا شيء بجور الرياكشن أنا عفوا neutralization. What is neutralization? What is the exact meaning of neutralization? Why acid and base react together? They call it neutralization. They neutralize each other. Acid and base are opposite of each other. Two different things. So when they react with the same amount, when they react together, they are neutralizing each other. But what is exactly reacted? The exact reaction is actually between hydronium and hydroxide. Why? Because what makes an acid? A hydronium makes an acid. تشتك فيها أسيدة. إذا اشتك هيدرونيوم بريسكا. بس ما في أرينات. تشتك base. What is a base? Something that produces hydroxide. So with this H3O, what defines acid? Hydronium. What defines base? Hydroxide. When they react together, these two things, we call it neutralization. Okay? Let's look at this part. This is an acid, this is a base. Complete and write the net ion equation. And if the reaction is diluted enough, the salt produced will be aqueous solution. عادة السلطة كانت حسابي شيء ولكن aqueous. عادة السلطة كمان aqueous. وحسابها كان كأوي كيباش من هيو aqueous. أتوين السلطة. For example, HCl with NaOH will produce what? It's an acid and base. HCl is acid. Base. باشا. أو أسيد أو بيزة. بعد السرخوان بنسي ما أشتريش كل الجيرة كم أنا دعي. ما أسيد. أما base. It says it will produce a salt. What is a salt? Salt is an ionic compound composed of saltless شيبيكاتوا. Cation from base. أبي كتاني base واحد. What is the base? This one. What is the cation? NH. So it's NH. And anion from acid. What is the anion of acid? Cl. Plus H2O. Plus H2O. We don't need balancing, it's already balanced. But, so they are mixed as aqueous. What is NaCl? Is NaCl solid? Yes, it is solid. What about H2O? H2O is liquid. What is the state of H2O? Always liquid. Don't forget that, because in this chapter, next chapter, chapter 7, you need to understand that H2O is liquid. And I will tell you what is the importance of this one here. Everybody, please pay attention to this part, the next part. This part is important. It's very important for you to understand. When HCl is aqueous, then it will become H and Cl. But can an acid dissolve in water, become aqueous, and only produce H and Cl? No. HCl actually reacts with the water. It needs the water to become H3O and Cl. So for HCl, in order to become H3O and Cl, what did it need? It needed the H2. Shiwis boy HCl بالبابا H3O Cl شي ضربوا boy. It needed an H2O. Why? Because H cannot stay in the solution alone. It will react with an H2O. But as you can see, we have only HCl and aqueous. So you have to think about that. I have to bring an H2O. In the equation, I have to write an H2O. If I want to make it an ion, I have to write an H2O. كواتم مادام H بتاعتنا بكاتم H2O يتوزع. So what do I do? Everyone, pay attention very carefully. In order for this H not to be alone, I have to add one H2O to the equation so that the H can bond with the H2O. كواتم أبي أو H2O يشبه بنسم بوي لبرخاتي ببي H3O. So together, these two together become H3O. But everyone, I have added an H2O to the reactant side. So I have changed the balance. I have ruined the whole thing. In order to balance the equation again, what do I have to do? I have to add one H2O also to the product side. So add H2O to balance the H2O in the reactant. كواتب تشي بكم أبي H2O كتير زيادة كم بو product أبو خلاص كات ولا H2O reactant. هاتو دوباره كمان. Let me repeat it again. HCl, when it says it's aqueous, it means that it's already has become H3O and Cl. It has already reacted with the H2O, but we just say aqueous. But if you want to separate it and write the ions, you cannot only write H and Cl. You have to write H3O and Cl. But in order to become H3O, what do we need? We need an H2O. So when you add an H2O to this side, you have to also add an H2O to this side. Then we are done. Now, just write all the other remaining ions and that's it. So we have H3O. What else do we have? Cl. NaOH separates to become Na and OH. So it becomes Na and OH. We don't need it for anything else. We should turn on it. And becomes NaCl, it's aqueous. So it is Na aqueous. These are all aqueous. Plus Cl, but everyone. And we have how many H2O do we have? 2 H2O. What is the state of the H2O? Liquid. From liquid, can H2O separate to become ion? No, because we said H2O cannot conduct electricity alone. So it doesn't have ions. So it's only H2O. We leave it as that. Always, we leave H2O alone. Always. Now, what can be cancelled in this equation? So this is overall ionic equation. I'm overall ionic equation. What are the ions that can be cancelled? Na and Cl. So Na and Cl are spectator ions. And you Cl chain spectator ion. So what is left? Sorry, not Cl, OH. H3 and OH has become what? Yes. This is net ionic equation for all neutralizations. Let's go back to the definition, everyone. What is the definition? Definition here. The definition of neutralization is the reaction of hydronium and hydroxide. As you can see, what has reacted here? Just a reaction H3OOH has reacted. أو H3OH reaction كده. So this is the net equation. These have undergone reaction, not the Cl and Na. راس الصول ما مدرسه بس لبري أعلى صولتك تواوت soluble عليها. كاتي دوباره كم كرنا. Whenever we have an acid and base, they produce salt and H2O. And when we want to write the overall ion equation, what is the for the net ion equation? When we need the overall ionic equation, you have to separate all the compounds to ions. But in every solution, in every reaction, when we have acid, please don't forget the H2O. Please don't forget the H2O. For every H, we need an H2O. If we have 2H, we need 2H2O. And you will add 2H2O to the other side. قرنا شن H man هبو أوانا شن H man هبو أوانا H2O لولا زيادة. شن H man هبو أوانا H2O لولا زيادة. Then you will cancel, if the salt is soluble, you will cancel the ions of the salt, and what you are left with the net ion equation, that is H3OH with becomes to H2O. This is correct for all acid and bases that undergo neutralization, for all neutralization reactions. As long as the salt is soluble. As long as the salt is soluble. بشرط السalt is soluble. ماشي كلنا كزيت يعني قشت يا جماعه
والله ما وصل لو تناقموا يتشبوشي بيستوي بزياكين
بيتا وثمان كاكاتك سيدك ايونين زكات ايونس لقد اشتوى الرياكشن ناكر اما هو بايونيزيشن رياكشن ما هو لقد صوفنتك يا سيدي ما نما ودا بي اتش 3 ودراسكا نما ودا بي اتش قد نتواني لنا او بتاكتني بمنتو يجي اوين موضوعك ام اتش اخو مثلا او اتش سي لك لقل اتش 2 انا ذكر خو سي لك الرياكشن لقل نكدو لقل اتش 2 اجر رياكشن كردوا اتشكل شو لقل اتش 2 اتشكل رياكشن اتشكل شو تشي بي ويست بوا اتش 2 بي ويست بوا امش لما يكوشنا ك اتش 2 كمان بونس ولا هذا اللي انا شا مجبورين بيبونسي باشا كرخون
دست خوشم
الجماعة بينوسن يبدو داخل شكرا بانو يكتش حد H3PO4 with NaOH. Now H3PO4 with NaOH react together. Salt and water. What is salt? Cation of base or cation base. Anion of acid or anion acid. So it becomes NaPO4, but PO4 has a charge of 3, so we have to write a 3 here. Plus H2O. Plus H2O. If you want to separate them, first we have to balance them. So we have 3 sodium here, only 1 sodium here. So you will add 3 here. Let's balance the hydrogen. 3 hydrogen here, 3 hydrogen also here. 6 hydrogen. What about here? 2. So 3 times 2, 6. Let's see if the oxygen is balanced. We have PO4. We have 3 oxygen here. We also have 3 oxygen here, so it's balanced. Oxygen is balanced. Now, what happens when you separate them? So these are all aqueous, of course, because they are diluted solution. Aqueous. But so what about this salt? It contains Na, so it is soluble. It is aqueous. H2O is liquid. If they get separated, how many hydrogens do we have here? 3 hydrogens. And PO4. These are Na and OH. We know that. But for the acid, Whitman for every H, H2 so with every H2O, how many H do we have? 3. How many H2O do we need? 3 H2O. H2O money. If we have 3, we add 3 H2O here, so we have to also add 3 H2O there. سيمانلير هي بس سجل وزيابكين. مادام سيمانلير هي بس سجل وزيابكين. Together, همو H لقال H2 قابل بيك H3O. كات CH لقال CH2 becomes 3H3O. همو H لقال H2 قابل ب H3O. يعني يك بيك ب H3O. C بس جاب CH3O. Plus PO4 plus 3Na plus 3OH 3Na plus PO4 plus 6H2O. كورنا طبعا هم كوكر. What can be cancelled? The salt is soluble, so PO4 and Na are cancelled. PO4 and Na can cancel. So this is overall. What is left? 3H3O is left. 3OH is left. And 6H2O is also left. As you can see, we have removed PO4 and we have removed the Na. Now, we have 3. Why do we want to write 336? Sorry, 336. Why do we want to write 336 while we can simplify? Not why simplify again. Yes, we can simplify. By what number? By 3. Simplify by 3. Simplify by 3. Simplify by 3 becomes 2. What is the net ion equation? H3O plus OH becomes 2H2O. Same net ion equation, same. همان net ion equation هنا عين الشيء كده كات دوباره بتو. As long as the salt is soluble. بشرتك salt كده soluble به. بشرتك salt كده soluble. باشا. If you want to, you can write it in Kurdish. Bilirsin. Hemen net ionic. Yakup bak İngilizce. Same net ionic as long as the salt is soluble. Başlayalım. بشرط صوتك soluble به أين النت ionic equation درجة؟ يعني قبل من وزاري هاتوتي نت ionic equation دوانه. أنا تأكيد صوتك soluble بيزنا كحليك يكسب له H3O OH كات 2H2. هذا بسياري نتكيك. فلا ما قربون من بسياري overall يكرد. ودي بيز أحمد شكوب بسياري واش جاوبون من بتاعتي لأن تكانا يعني نشتكي. ودي بيز أحمد لناو overall كيا لتوتال كيا شن اشتري أمان هي. أنا سي اشتري.
Sure.
Yes.
In the
yes, Mas.
For the net ionic equation, why didn't we cancel 3OH and 6H2O?
Yes, we have cancelled it. Why not? It is cancelled. Look at here.
I
We have,
mean,
what do you
in
mean by?
overall ionic.
Oh, in overall, why? Because we have, in overall, we have PO4. Because we have one PO4. That's why.
I
Because you
didn't
have to,
understand.
because you have one PO4. Moaz, in every reaction, when you divide something by a number, you have to divide all of the other things, including PO4. So if you want to divide H3O and OH and H2O by 2, you also have to divide them by 2. You have to also divide the PO4 and also the Na. But can you divide the PO4? So we waited until we cancel that PO4. Now do you understand?